Awesome. So hello, everybody, and welcome to our second last Landcare Checks-In for 2024. First off, my name's Eve. I'd just like to introduce myself as the new Member Services Manager for the WA Landcare Network. I'm sure we can all agree that Casey will be missed, and I wish her the best of luck in her new position. Welcome to our Executive Officer, Jack, who is joining us today, and a shout out to our funding bodies, State NRM and the National Landcare Network. Today, we are grateful to be joined by Juliet Seers and Kamrit Slatia from the Atlas of Living Australia and CSIRO. But before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that I live and work on Whadjuk Noongar Boodja, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I extend a deep respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders on the call today and acknowledge their ongoing connection to land, sea, and sky as the world's oldest continuous living culture. So please feel free, everybody, to acknowledge what country you're on in the chat function. So let's jump in. Juliet has over 8 years of experience in the environmental sector, specialising in environmental communication and education. She has planned and executed programs spanning a variety of participants, including kindy to year 12s, university and vocational education students, and community programs. She is currently working with the Atlas of Living Australia, who specialise in providing public access to big data on Australian biodiversity, which can then be used to enhance research outcomes and decision-making. Cam is the Project Manager for National Biodiversity Data Initiatives at CSIRO. He has experience in leading teams through change, policy development, liaison, negotiating difficult outcomes, and developing innovative solutions to issues by harnessing different sectors in collaborative partnerships. Now, I'm going to hand over to Juliet and Cam. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us. I'll just share you can hear me fine, can't you?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll just share my screen to get these slides up. Did that work?
Yep.
Yeah? Okay.
Good.
Fantastic. Thanks everyone for joining. Cam and I will be presenting a bit today on the ALA, what we are, what we do, maybe how we can be helpful for you, and how you guys can be helpful for us as well. So I'll also reaffirm that lovely acknowledgement of country you gave, Eve. I'm on Wiradjuri Wurrung land of the Kulin Nation. Cam's in Canberra, so Ngunnawal country. It's really lovely. We're all geographically spread out, but do stand on beautiful country. We've already done a great introduction to me. That's fine. Do you want to do an introduction to you, Cam? All good? No? All right.
Oh, no, I think it's all been said.
That's fine. We can get into the nicer slides then, that means. That's fine. We'll start with what the ALA is. So some people might know what the ALA is, or the Atlas of Living Australia, some might not. We are an open access biodiversity database, and so we bring together data from different partners, which can include researchers or institutions, as well as citizen scientists. The ALA aims to be like a central point that individuals and organisations needing biodiversity data can go to, rather than having data from different sources be siloed and needing to be accessed individually, which would make it quite difficult to analyse this kind of data comprehensively. We provide free and open access to over 140 million records and provide tools and information to support decision-making and research. And our records are also standardized, which means they're formatted to make data cleaning and analysis a little bit easier as a starting point for researchers and practitioners, and they can also be integrated then with other data sets or import into programs like GIS as well. The ALA can be used as a supplementary tool as well to the state atlases, if any of you use them. And it feeds into a global atlas that's called the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. So that's pretty cool. I mentioned we have over 140 million records. It's actually 146. What I mean when I refer to records on the ALA is what we call an occurrence record. So an occurrence record is a record of a species that's occurred in a location at a certain point in time. So if you can imagine you're in the field, maybe doing some survey work, and you see a wallaby, you would like most likely note down what you've seen, where you saw it, and when you saw it. So those are kind of the minimum fields of information we would need for a record in the ALA. And then if you imagined your observation of a wallaby becoming a point on our map that's with everyone else's points, it could kind of look a bit like this. So these dots on the map are all records that are held by the ALA for different species, or in one case here, subspecies of the family Macropodidae. I think I've pronounced that right, which include kangaroos, wallabies, and other marsupials native to Australia and New Guinea. These data points can help to better understand distribution and changes in species over time. So, for example, has a certain species range been extending further south? This could be due to things like climate changing and they're having to find cooler climates. Or did a seasonal species used to only start to appear in an area in October and now it's not appearing until November because the conditions aren't quite right? You can then also overlap these data points with other contextual layers about like climate or vegetation, which could give you some interesting insights into the ecological preferences of a species that could inform decisions you're making when maybe revegetating or reintroducing species to an area. We have data from over 800 partners. They come from many, many different sectors. And they provide all those data points that I showed on the previous slide. Our work kind of revolves around these two key groups. We have those who supply the data and those who access and use it. Without both of them, the ALA couldn't really function, because if we had no data, it means there's nothing to share. And if we don't have people accessing it, it means there's not really any purpose for even having the data there. So what does the process of ingestion look like to be able to access all of this data on the ALA? Basically, we get all different types of data. It could be observations, it could be from natural history collections, it could be from camera trap data. These data sets then feed through to our partners. So that's just a few of them there, but there's many. And they will then transfer that data to the ALA. And that means then you can access it all in one place, like I said, rather than having to obtain access and collate the data from all these different partners individually. A significant portion of our data comes from citizen science, which some of you may be aware of. Citizen science involves so the everyday public contributing to scientific research. In the context of the ALA, it's a way for individuals and groups like Landcare to actively participate in bringing in valuable data that can be used for research and decision making. There's a lot of apps now available to participate in citizen science, a portion of which feed into the ALA. So you could use them if you wanted in your field work to document what's on the land you're managing, and that means that data will be available to other people. Some of the apps even have the ability to set up like a project, which would mean you could have all the information from one group in one location. So if you have multiple users on a platform from your Landcare group, you'll have all the data for your group though in one location, even though multiple people are making those observations. So you could set up a project for people from the Landcare group to contribute to. I had a look on one of our platforms, iNaturalist, yesterday. I found a few Landcare projects have, which is great. And similarly, Field Naturalists, if any of you are involved with them, they also do this sometimes. Now I might, yeah, all right. I'll go through a case study on Frog ID and then I'll throw it to you, Cam. So just for a case study, there's an app called Frog ID that some of you might have heard of. We recently had Frog ID Week, which is really exciting, and it's where people are encouraged to submit as many frog records as they can over a concentrated period of time. So this is an example of citizen science. Frogs are really great with an app like this because they can be very sensitive to disturbance. However, their calls when they're accompanied by a location are usually able to be quite well identified. And this means that the data can be gathered with very minimal disturbance then to such an important taxon group. Frog ID also has a number of frog experts who work in the background to listen to all the calls that people log and verify their accuracy. I'll get eCam to take over from here to talk a little bit more about how citizen science records are verified. Would it be good if I stopped sharing? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Julie.
Let's do that. Stop share. There we go.
Whoop. So hopefully this is going to work. I'm hoping everybody can see a cool lizard. So look, and firstly, apologies for not actually doing any plant examples. I did actually intend to pull up some WA species to go through, but I was actually in a meeting till about a minute and a half before our talk this afternoon. So I'm just really ill prepared. So I've gone for some old favourites. So just to build on what Juliet's been talking about, so the ALA combines, as she's already said, a huge number of data sources. Of the 146 million records, getting on towards 70 million of them come from citizen science, and it's the fastest growing data source in the ALA. Last year we got about 12 million records from citizen science, and that was double pretty much all other sources. So it is an important data source. It comes with kind of handle with care labels, because while there's a lot of great data in there, there's also some really crap data. But that is actually true of any of our data sources. It doesn't matter if you're talking museums and herbaria, state and territory data sets, all of them have a proportion of crap data. And what I was just going to quickly do is show you some a couple of ways that with citizen science, you can potentially at least check whether the record you're looking at is actually a valid one. So this is a standard species page for the Atlas of Living Australia. As Juliet said, it's actually compiled from a variety of sources, and I'll talk about the taxonomy a bit later. But if you actually, the page will have a whole bunch of dots on it, which tells you the observation records and where they're from. You can see that there's a combination of clustered dots and dots from various other places, which may or may not be dodgy. But if you want to interrogate the data in more detail, if you use the view and download occurrence buttons and go to the map source, you can actually query the dots that you're looking at. Now, what I'm going to do is pick one of the outlier dots, which I happen to know is actually a citizen science record, and I'm going to, having clicked on it, I'm going to view the record. Now, this will take you to the actual record that's been entered into the ALA. In this case, it's come from one of our citizen science sources, the ALA Species Sighting and Oz Atlas, which is an old citizen science site that ALA itself set up. The great thing about most of the citizen science data sets is they've got photos associated with them. So depending on what taxon group you're talking about, whether it's a plant or an animal, quite often you can verify the ID. So in this instance, there is a photo, and if we click on it, and I'm a herpetologist, that is actually Delna ornata, which is really quite exciting because it's it's a really rare species, and B, it's from several hundred kilometres outside its known distribution range. So this is just a really good example of how you can validate a citizen science record if you're looking at one in the ALA. It shows you and really the comparative advantage of this to a lot of the more typical data sets like state atlas data sets, where you very rarely can use subsidiary information to check a record. citizen science data is structured in such a way that you can at least take a stab on whether or not the record is actually reliable. And now my blasted screen is behind everything else and I can't get to it. So sorry, I didn't mean to go to Grevillea then. So then the other thing while I was just doing this, the other thing I was just going to show you, and this applies to all records in the ALA. Once you're on this occurrence record field, if you mistrust the data, the other thing you can do, as Juliet said, we do apply some standard. We standardize some of the information that's coming in from individual data sets. So, for example, we apply a standard scientific name based on the national species list, which I'll be talking about a bit later. But if you're worried about the difference between the original and applied data, there's this button here called Compare Original versus Processed Data. And what that enables you to do is to actually see what name has been applied by what data has been added by the ALA on the right versus the original record on the left. So we know it was identified as Dilma impar in the original data. That's matched to Dilma impar in the ALA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this data set's really old. It has very little other data, but most data sets that you look, or most records that you looked at in the ALA, there will be a whole bunch of additional information here, and you can check the reliability of the original record. And on that note, Juliet, I might stop sharing and throw back to you when I figure out how to stop sharing.
It was when I went back to the browser window for Zoom.
Yes, except it's all now become very segmented.
Here we go.
There we go.
On your behalf, Camel. Good. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Sorry for being incompetent.
It's all good.
So, interrogating the records like that can be really helpful when you're in areas where records might be quite sparse, or if you're looking at threatened species. So when there are less records, you might notice something that's more of an outlier, or that particularly if it's threatened species, there might be minimal records. So you want to make sure the ones you're looking at are of the correct species you're interested in. I'll go back to my slides. There we go. So there's quite a few different citizen science data platforms you can use. I've got them all. Actually, these aren't all of them, so I shouldn't say that. But these are kind of some of the bigger ones that contribute to the ALA. Digivol is really cool as an alternative to, like, if you have accessibility issues or you're just someone who can't make it out into the outdoors very often. Digivol is kind of a way of citizen science where you're verifying records from your computer. So when there's like camera trapping projects and stuff that happen, you can be one of the people there who helps narrow down the results of those for processing, which is really cool for making these types of activities accessible for everyone. Now, I'll do a demonstration of how to kind of use the ALA, basically, which I assume will be helpful. Okay, just put that on that window and share screen again. Window. Okay, and share. Okay, so when you go onto the ALA, this is our homepage. I'm just going to look over here for a second because that's where my screen is. This is what the homepage looks like. What we're going to go through today is if you want to query, say, a specific area, how you could do that. So there's a couple of methods. One of them on the ALA is to use a function. If it's on the front page under this researchers tab, and it's called Explore Your Area. So what Explore Your Area does is it gives you a kind of radius around wherever you are, and it'll show you all the records we have. I don't know why it's showing me as being there in Melbourne. I'm not, but that's fine. But you can pop in wherever you are. So I don't know. Let's say you are in Central Perth somewhere. We can type that in, and these are kind of all the records we have for there. And you could do the same for wherever you are. And it kind of gives you a good starting point to understand what's there. You can also use these filters to narrow things down. So you could go, I'm just interested in reptiles. And then it will show you all the reptiles and you get the counts here. So that's how many. So we've got 480 northern snake-necked turtles in Perth. It's very cool. And then if you wanted to view those records, say on a bigger map or in some way, you can click View Selected Records. And it will then come up with them here. And you could apply even more filters if you were interested in it. So you could go by, if you are only interested in what's there at a particular time of year, you might do like by month. If you're interested in by time frame, you could do by decade there. If you were interested only in records from certain providers, you can select here and then you can say, like, I only want, so yeah, it says include select items. So you could say, I only want records from the Australian Museum Ozcam, or you could say, I don't want any records from there. And it'll then filter it out. You can further customize filters. There's so many options. And once you've created a free account in the ALA, which you need to do if you want to download records, when you click customize filters and you kind of get that sidebar looking how you like, it will remember those preferences and apply them to any searches you do in the future. If, though, you were interested as well in maybe a different area, we can get rid of these points here. And we can create like a customized polygon. So I'll just let it load. Maybe. It's having a think. All right. So what I can do is... Okay. It's finished thinking. All right. So now it's given us all the records. That's very overwhelming. We're not going to keep all of these records here for now because that's too much. But basically what we can do is zoom in slowly. And I like to change the map because I find this white map a bit hard to understand where I am. Okay. So then what you can do is kind of locate wherever you are, wherever the Landcare area is maybe that you're working on. Let's zoom in here to this reserve. Let's say this is where we were interested in looking at records. You can do this function here, which says draw a polygon. And you can kind of, so you select along the perimeter of the area you're interested in. You can see that's starting to slowly, color in an area. And then when you've kind of got to the end of it, you select the first point again. That's now telling me that within this shape that I've just created, there are 386 species that have been seen, and there's over 2,000 records. So I might just be interested in what's here. I don't want to see all of those records from everywhere else. I will click search for records in this area, and it's gotten rid of all that noise kind of around it now. If you wanted to look at the records, they're all here. And like Cam said, you can check them for if there's images associated with them and stuff by you click view record, and that brings up the page that he had. You can also just click record images. Some of them will have images. We've also got herbarium specimens here, which is really cool. And when you want to download records, you just select this here. You do have to be logged in to download, so it might ask me to do that. Let me see. Okay, not yet. All right, it will ask you at some point to log in. You can create a free account, but basically I just wanted to go through here. When or if you want to download records, there's a few different options. This one's called occurrence records. So that will give you a full Excel sheet with kind of all of those fields on it. There is, when you select that, it has two options. So one says full Darwin core. That's the standard that we make the data. The other one's called ALA legacy format. We generally recommend people use that one, or Cam and I do anyway. I would describe it as a little bit more generally human friendly. It just uses language that might be a bit more accessible to everyone. So you might find that more useful. It doesn't get rid of any of the information, I don't believe. It just kind of uses different terms that are more intuitive. There's also this one that's called a species checklist. I think this one might be more of interest to Landcare groups. What this one does is it just will create a document that has the list of species that you've queried there with counts next to them. So it'll say like there's been this many records of this many records, rather than having line by line each individual record. But it's up to you how you want to do that. Then there's also this one's called a field guide. Field guides can be a bit hit and miss. They kind of will come up with it'll be a PDF with a booklet, and it'll have all the species in the area, and it has kind of like a heat map for each one with Australia. So it shows which gives you an idea of like, is it quite endemic to the area I'm interested in or not? The images can be a bit, because being in Australia, we do get like a lot of roadkill, unfortunately. So you might not actually find the images the most engaging, but maybe that's helpful too. I think the checklist is probably of more use, or the actual records themselves, but up to you guys. And then you lastly have to select what industry you're from, which is really helpful to just put some consideration into that, because we do look at that every year, and we kind of keep that in mind when we're advocating for what changes to make in the ALA to make sure it's useful for our users. Now, lastly, Cam was just going to chat quickly about taxonomy in the ALA and lists, I think, and then we can throw to any questions. Oh, and I'll stop sharing. Sorry.
Hi, everybody again. Just let me, I'm going to share my screen this time, just because I'm going to flick between a few things, but apologies if you get to see my awful emails that regularly come in. Hopefully everybody can see the mess that is my desktop. So what I'm going to do quickly is actually start off by just kind of showing an example of when Juliet was kind of talking about that legacy format. And I'm just going to make this a bit bigger so you can all see it. So this is an example of a download file that I did a few months ago, but basically, if you download the full Darwin Core legacy format, the Darwin Core format, there are literally thousands of fields, and they're not usable by third parties because they're all in kind of computer code. Whereas if you scroll across on these, you can see that the various categories like state, local government areas are all relatively sensible. What I wanted to do was actually just highlight a couple of useful fields, and this is my lead into taxonomy. So the ALA basically, because we get data from literally hundreds of sources, everybody's tended to use their own taxonomies. So taxonomy is, for those of you who are less familiar with it, is the science of naming species. Most species have more than one scientific name because species names are a theory in the science of taxonomy. So when a taxonomist describes a species, they'll propose the name as a theory to be tested. And over time, that theory will be retested, changed, etc. And as a consequence, you get species names changing over time. That means you can get the same species names used several times. You can get spelling variations of species names, and you can get, really annoyingly, the same species name occurring in, for example, fish and plants. And so what the ALA does to try to at least minimise that as a problem is we use the standard of the National Species List, which is maintained by the Australian Biological Resources Study. What we try to do, though, is make it so that if we've changed the scientific name, you can tell what we've changed it to. And I've already showed you that screen in individual record where you can compare original values versus the values that we've processed. When you download data, you can do the same thing. So if you look at the fields in the download, there's a column called original scientific name and a column called interpreted scientific name. So the original scientific name is the scientific name that was supplied with the record, and the scientific name interpreted is the name that we've interpreted as. Now, what I'm looking at here is actually blind snakes. And if I actually did a filter, what you would see is that for most blind snake records in Australia, all of the old records, which were mostly all originally in a genus called Rhamphotyphalops, have been reapplied to Ankylos, which is the genus that most Australian blind snakes occur in today. The other field I was going to quickly draw your attention to, so the ALA applies sensitive data filters according to the wishes of the state or territory that the data falls in. So for Western Australia, DBCA treat all rare and threatened species as sensitive species. So we generalise all records of DBCA threatened species to a 10 kilometre grid. Now, if you're wanting to check whether that's happened, if you've downloaded a species list and you scroll to the far right of the spreadsheet, and I'm just going to, there is a field which hopefully you should all be able to see there called data generalized during processing. And if you filter that field, there'll be an entry for any record that's been filtered. And I'm just going to have to move the spreadsheet slightly so I can get to it. So I'm just going to apply the filter for the purposes of showing you. And I'm just going to remove all the blanks. So there'll be a subset of records which have entries that say, this record is WA priority 1 in Western Australia. That means that record's been generalised, which means that the location will be out by 10 kilometres or some subset of 10 kilometres, because basically what we do is remove decimal points. So the point, wherever it is within that degree, will basically be drawn to the southwest corner, if that makes sense. Anyway, sorry, that's just a useful thing to know, because people quite often wonder why data is not where it should be. And if it's a sensitive species, that will be the answer. Now, just moving on to taxonomy, and I'm just going to close that. So I have actually pulled up a plant example. So as I've already explained, we apply a standard taxonomy to all records in the ALA. There are advantages and disadvantages to the ALA. The ALA is incredibly powerful if you're interested in species records. It does have limitations if your interest in it is casual. So what we've tried to do is design a system where you can interrogate it as much as you want, or not interrogate it as much as you want. But the less you interrogate it, the less information you're actually going to get out of it, which has pros and cons. And this is one of the cons. So obviously, for those of you who are really into plants, you'll recognize a phrase name. It's an informal scientific name, so it's a name that hasn't yet been formally described. Most phrase names for plants in Australia come in the form of genus name, then with a text string that will tell you something about the nature of the specimen. Now, this particular species is only found in the Great Victoria Desert. You will notice if I, and I don't know if you guys can actually see the rest of the screen that I can't, but I can't. Curse Microsoft, I hate it when it does that. Anyway, you will note that all of the records for the species rather implausibly in New South Wales. There is a reason for that. The ALA in its effort to kind of standardize the way that data presents, treats any non-standard scientific name as a possible error. So what it's doing is, in this instance, showing you the incorrect records, but filtering out the correct records. So if you are interested in species, I would always recommend going to, in the sort of searches that Juliet was showing you earlier, go to the view and download records screen and turn off exclude records based on scientific name quality. Because if we then look at the map, what you will then see is the actual records for Grevillea Victoria Desert occurring in Western Australia. What's happened is that the phrase name is not recognised by our scientific name construction, and so it gets filtered out. The records that you can see in New Zealand are from a herbarium and a botanical gardens collection, because we show all data. The records in New South Wales are ones that I discovered last week, and really frustratingly, when the raw scientific name's been matched against the taxonomy in the ALA, it's actually matched a number of cultivars incorrectly to this species. So my job in the ALA is kind of fixing errors like that. So those records should actually disappear in the next month or two. But what I'm trying to do is kind of show you the fact that the ALA can be used really effectively to show a whole range, serve a whole range of end users, but you need to be aware of the advantages and disadvantages. So in an area search of the sort that Juliet was showing you, I would always turn off the scientific name filter if I was doing it, because it will help show you the records that are informal scientific names, which for plants is really important. However, the other thing you should always do is, if your species list shows things that you kind of go, really? I've never seen that here. It's always just checking, doing that comparison of original sign name versus applied sign name, in case data matching has done something a little bit weird. Anyway, on that note, I will hand back to Juliet when I figure out how to do it once again.
I think that's actually all we had. I have like a ta-da end slide, but I'm happy to just go to questions. I can see there's already one.
Thank you, Juliet.
That's all right.
Thank you both so much for your presentation. It sounds like such an incredible resource for not only sharing information across the sector, but also observing that spatial occurrence and biodiversity data. I think particularly in aiding citizen science and community land care. But yeah, I was actually involved in a volunteer citizen science project using iNaturalist called the Walpole Wilderness BioBlitz.
Yep.
Yeah, it was awesome. And it was so cool to see all of the data collated at the end of the project. Yeah, such an awesome resource. Now we're going to open the floor to Q&A. Does anybody have any questions?
There's one in the chat, Eve, might be good to read out, or unless Claire Caldera would like to ask her question.
Mm-hmm.
Claire, did you want to jump in? No, she's got two questions here and she's not jumping in. So Cam and Juliet, does the industry disclosure have to be the same everywhere? I.e., if you're a plant taxonomist looking at reptile data?
That's a Cam question, I think.
That's a Cam question.
That's a Cam question.
Look, I think what we're trying to, with the disclosure, what we're trying to do is understand why you're using the ALA. And literally the reason for doing that is it influences how we do our work program. So, for example, like a classic example would be in my work on taxonomy, and trying to improve the taxonomic backbone, which has improved quite a bit over the last 12 months. And when we do our next update of taxonomy in January, you will notice a massive further improvement in the quality of name matching and in looking up names, particularly in Western Australia. But our work program is driven by where we see users. So, for example, we know that for the last 5 years, we've had about 3,500 users out of government in Australia across 216 agencies. So we know data, we know citizen science data, NRM data gets used all the time for government decision making on a regular basis from the ALA. But we also know, rather interestingly, that there's been 2,500 users out of industry. Now, the bulk of those will be for environmental assessments. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. But incredibly, there's 11 other industry sectors that actually use the ALA in everything from graphic design through to wildlife strike. Now, for example, if we know someone's using the ALA for wildlife strike, so bird strike at airports, for example, we know what data that we have to focus on improving, if that makes sense. And that's really the reason for the question. The reason for the question when you're interrogating records. I hope that answers the question.
Well, we'll leave it with Claire to see if she comes back. Yes. Is it possible to rematch this? There's so much info to observe. There is a huge amount of info to observe. Is there a search filter to filter out herbarium vouchers and stuffed specimens?
Oh, yes, there is. Oh,
Great.
topic dear to my heart.
Look out.
Okay. So look, if I can share my screen again briefly.
Please do. Then we'll come to Linda with her question.
Okay, so I'm just going to stay on the same screen that I left on. So basically, you can so filtering for herbarium specimens and museum specimens should be straightforward. There's several ways of doing it, but the easiest way of doing it is actually going down to data resource. And if you look at data resource, you can actually, for any species, identify the source. So in this instance, literally all of the data is coming from herbarium specimens. If you're dealing with either a range of records together, so the kind of query that Juliet was showing you, or you're just doing a general query in the ALA, the actual fastest way to do it is to go to record and record type. So preserved specimen will normally be museum or herbarium specimens. So if you click that, you will automatically reduce your data set down to herbarium or museum specimens, and then you can use that other field that I showed you, data resource, to get to the particular specimens you're interested in. There are other ways of doing it, but like, this is the thing, that the ALA is really powerful and flexible. This is the easiest way of doing it. Anyway, I'll leave it there.
Oh, thank you.
I just wanted to say for Claire that there is a lot of information. We're happy to send out some resources after this if that's helpful.
Yeah, we'll send out resources as well as a recording of this session to everybody who's registered. So yeah, you'll be able to access all of the info, which is awesome. Should we head over to Linda?
Hello, I'm from the Frenchman Bay Association. I was wondering whether the database includes marine species or is it purely land-based?
Do you want me to take that, Julia?
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Yep. So it includes it includes all marine data out to the exclusive economic zone in Australia. Now, in actual fact, well, so yes, it includes both marine and terrestrial. The other thing I would note, if you actually go to the window that Juliet showed you, so you click on the total number of species in the ALA, you can actually, so we don't, when we pull in data, what we display as species pages and searchable data is the data that actually matches our taxonomy. If you're actually interested in, for example, elephant specimens from museums in Australia, most museums and herbaria in Australia throw us all their data. So you can actually, provided you know the scientific name, search in that field for any species that you're interested in. If it's in an Australian data set or an Australian collection, you will actually be able to find it. It's just that we don't advertise that as an option. That the reason why that's important for marine species, what you can search for easily in the system are things that match Australian taxonomy, but there is a subset of species sort of floating, pardon the pun, floating around in the data that will include species records either outside the exclusive economic zone of Australia or fall within the exclusive economic zone of Australia, but aren't in our taxonomy. So you can actually search for those if you want to by going to that top level page. I hope that made sense.
Thank you.
Oh, good.
Cool. Do we have anybody else? Does anyone else have anything they want to ask Juliet and Cam?
You can also email us if you think of anything later. Sometimes you digest information and then it occurs.
Yeah. Sally?
Yeah, I'm just writing in the chat, but you mentioned the apps for recording. I took a screenshot, but when you send out your presentation, if you could send out the apps for recording species from a citizen scientist point of view,
Of course, yeah,
that'd be great.
can do.
So, thank you.
Given that we have a tiny bit of time left, I wonder if we should indulge ourselves and ask anyone in Western Australia if they use the ALA, and they could give Juliet the location, and Juliet can bring it up and drill into it. So at Friends of Clontarf Hill, Eve, do you put anything into ALA?
Not to my knowledge. We haven't used
Okay.
that platform yet.
What about you, Bill, at Friends of Meelup or your Meelup group?
Not that I'm aware of. So it's a question that sprung straight to my mind that I need to ask that question. But it looks
Great.
amazing. And one question I did have is, if we don't use it and we'd like to use it, is it possible to get some, I guess, one-on-one training, or not one-on-one, but to a small group of people who want to use it and use it effectively?
Sure, yeah, could do that. That would be fine. Maybe if you've got, like a Landcare group or like a group of you, we could definitely do that.
Yes, because in our group, we've got some amazing plant specialists and animal specialists, and it'd be really good if they're not aware of the ALA, is to bring it to them, and then I guess for efficiency in updating data is the more training we have, the better we'll use it and the more effective your data collection will be.
Of course, I can do that. Did you want, I was just thinking when we were talking about contributing data, sometimes you can be surprised about what data exists in an area that you don't know about. So I'm happy to search an area and just see what comes up, even if you haven't contributed.
Well, let's jump in and put in the parameters of the Meelup and the reserve there and see what comes up.
So what's the reserve's name? Sorry?
It's Meelup Reserve, MEELUP.
Yeah.
And it's just to the east of Cape Naturalist.
Okay.
And it goes to the coast and along the coast.
It might be under Meelup Regional Park.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me see.
Meelup Regional Park.
Juliet,
Give me 1 minute. Yeah.
while you're just pulling that up, there's a question that's just popped up about is it possible to limit the amount of download of data or information downloaded? Completely useless list with way more fields than I needed to prepare for a field trip. The second option that Juliet showed you, the species list option, should actually generate you a list with very few fields. It's literally just a list of species known from the area with their the number of observations known. That is the minimal amount of information you can get. If you download the version that I was showing you, the legacy format is kind of the next level up. So that does have a lot of fields, but they're structured in a way to make it easy to decide which ones you like. You can basically get rid of the entire second half of the spreadsheet without doing any discernible damage to the information that you're trying to pick up. So they'd be your two simple options.
Okay. I think I can do
To
this.
share with us, Juliet?
Yeah, I'm getting it up. I was looking for GPS coordinates and that sent me on a wild goose chase. But then I just looked it up on Google.
Did you find any wild geese?
I was waiting to see if you knew where the Naturalist Ridge was, Juliet.
Well, I do now.
It's the bit that used to be connected to India.
Okay, here we go.
I used to work in WA, so I know. But
Okay, so I'm guessing it's here.
You got it.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay, let me ask it to reshare here. Can I make the circle reappear here? Or maybe I'll type in Eagle Bay and see. That should work.
look, I have to apologise. I'm actually going to have to bail out. I actually have to go to another meeting. I'm terribly sorry, everybody, but lovely to meet you all.
That's okay.
We
Thank
understand
you so
why you're
much,
so
Cam.
popular, Cam. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Cam. Yeah,
Anyway, anything we can do to help, please let us know.
terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we do, that's what I mean. You never know what's going to be there about the areas that you're already interested in.
Yeah.
So we obviously have quite a bit of information already, which is cool.
Yep.
Let's have a look at where it comes from there. So,
Now,
sorry.
one interesting thing is there's quite a lot of marine observations, and there's a very strong whale watching group.
Ah,
Just
very
off
cool.
where your little circle is on Meelup Beach,
Yeah.
just very close to that.
Oh,
So
very
they every day during the
Whale
whale
watching
migration
group.
season, they collect
Meelup
that.
Beach.
So it looks like they've put a heap of stuff in there.
That's so good. Yeah, let's have so I think let's see. A lot of there's a lot of INAT records there. So that's
Yeah.
probably from the whale watching group, I reckon.
Quite likely.
But there's so many apps, isn't there? Echidna CSI has one record there, but I just want to give it a shout out because it was an awesome project that worked all around the country, and it like quadrupled the amount of echidna records we had. It was a few years ago, and it got people to send in like not just their observations, but they collected like scats of echidnas and sent them in. It was really amazing.
Well, it's interesting you highlight that because the echidna is something we're quite worried about because of fox and cat predation.
Yeah, very common. So it looks like there's been one, but maybe you guys could
We better go looking.
Yeah, do a bit of a bio blitz and see if you come across another. But yeah, no, there's all kinds of things. It happens as well. Like we work with ranger groups, and a lot of them, because they're so remote, they think there's probably no records there because they haven't been contributing themselves. But people travel through their Indigenous protected area zones because roads and stuff go through them, and there's lots of bird watchers and things that are logging birds as they go along, and they're like, oh wow, people like actually really care about this area and they're interested in what's around.
That's a
Really
great
cool.
segue, Juliet, because Donna Lee in our audience has asked, would you be keen to put in Canpa, where she's doing some remote trials with a robotic marvelous invention that we might hear about one day soon.
Oh,
That sounds amazing. Okay, well, that's with an N, right? Canpa.
Yes.
Let's see.
Oh, that's a long way away.
Oh wait, that's not our camper. That's a different camper.
That's when we really were joined up to India and still are on that result. And near Warburton, perhaps put in Warburton.
Okay. Warburton.
Burton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Burton. Yeah. Right, thank you. I'll put my R there. I got it. Okay.
Well done.
There we go. Okay.
Whoa.
Wow.
Is this the right Warburton? Is that?
Oh, that's
This is one in Victoria. Is that?
yeah.
No, we're thinking that's a lot of records for that one. Let's go WA.
Except
Okay.
that the mining industry would have collected a huge amount of data probably all
They
around. It's a big mining, gold mining and nickel mining area. So I don't know whether they put the data up on ALA.
Do you guys want to do a really tedious thing and direct me where to go? And I can manually move the point.
You see where the east-west road goes out and then turns south? And then
Here?
it's just north of that. Do you see some
Yeah.
lakes up there? Just go
Okay.
up to there. There,
Okay. I'll just move my point. Hang on. And we'll keep going.
yeah, go up a bit. Where are you now?
I
There's
know,
not a lot
sorry.
out there, so you want to
Alright.
go up north of Kalgoorlie, up and to the right. Whoop, down a bit,
Down.
down somewhere in there. Yeah,
Oh, okay. So Great Sandy Desert kind of area. Is that right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, not a
Yeah, so
lot.
there's a few. There's a ranger group I'm working with from there. They're called the Mardu group, and they've been interested in maybe working with the ALA. So I've actually been looking around here a little bit.
Can you come down a little bit, please, Juliet? Just come down on the map a bit.
How far are we thinking?
Okay, where are we? There's Lake Wells.
Wells.
Do you want me to zoom out more?
Any points there that pop up, Donnelly, that you went through on the way through the country?
Yeah, probably Laverton, and then a little further east.
Yeah.
Okay. I made it bigger. You can do that too, by the way.
Oh, look, I can see how once you got conversant with this, it would just be so fabulous to use.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah. So got a lot of, like what I thought. You get a lot of birds in the IPAs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of IPAs around here. That's sorry why I keep referring to them. I don't know if specifically here is, but there's a lot of birds because there's a lot of the kind of travelers and grey nomads and stuff traveling through and logging things as they go because you often notice the records follow, they'll be more dense around roads or trails and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Terrific. We've got another question we might close with. Claire's luckily going on holiday to the Bass Coast. And she's wondering how does she find out what data scientists are looking for?
Oh, I mean, all data is good data, Claire.
Is that right?
I don't want to put you up for too much of a challenge. I want you to enjoy your holiday. I mean, the ALA has we have a lot of bird data, which I kind of have hinted at. We have a lot of vertebrate data in general. What we have a real richness of, but a lack of data is probably looking at like invertebrates, like insects, things like fungi, all those kinds of more niche things that people tend to take for granted, but I'm sure people here don't. So you're probably someone who's in a good position, to log them. And it's not that they don't exist, it's just there tends to be less data for those things. And that's common around the world, actually.
Great. Look, I'm going to throw to Eve to close, but I think what we've heard is very much that there's a strong interest in maybe a community of practice forming to get some support and training in how to become proficient in using the ALA. So we might work, one might work closely with the ALA and get some ideas on how that could work and then circulate it out to the participants and then probably more broadly across the membership as well. So sometime in the new year, keep your eye open for that and we can develop that out from this. Over to you, Eve.
Cool, thank you, Jack. Thank you again, Juliet, for your presentation. It's been informative and so great to hear from you. As I said before, the recording from today and all of our resources will be emailed to everyone in a few days' time. In the email, we'll also have a link to WA Landcare's membership portal. So if you'd like to join the collective voice for Landcare in WA, we would love to have you. We'll also be sending out a super short survey, which will give everyone the opportunity to provide us with feedback on today's session. And whether you'd like to see more on the topic, like what Jack was saying with the communities of practice. So if you could fill that out, that would be awesome. And lastly, we have our final Landcare checks in for the year in early December, which is an exciting pop-up session focused on the new state NRM grant processes. And we'd love to see you there.
And you didn't hear
Jack?
it from me, but there's significant changes about money, about levels of admin funding, levels of on costs, salary increases, fencing increases. So it's looking a lot more attractive, particularly in the small grant bucket. And then that will impact the large grant bucket as well. So we're looking at around about, is it Eve, early the second week of December? So keep a space open for that. We will record it, but that'll give you the hot info on the next round of state NRM grants. That's going to kick off in December this year, first time ever.
Heard it here first.
Thanks, Jack.
So
That's
thank
great.
you so much for coming, everybody, and have a lovely week. We'll see you
Thank you,
next week.
Juliet. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank
See ya.
you.
You can stay on, Eve, and we'll have a little catch up.
There we go.
Tidied all that up. Recording goes off. Hang on, stop.
No, you do that. Yep.